What's up, guys? We're back in the MMA Meeting podcast, and I hope you guys have had a solid one. I just got done with the latest history podcast episode about Vlad the Impaler, the real-life Dracula. Bro impaled 20,000 people at one time. It was crazy. And then his own men killed him at the end, on accident too, because they thought he was someone else. And what else have I been doing? I've been watching Physical 100. I don't know if you guys have seen that on Netflix. It's like this Korean show where they got a bunch of very physically capable people doing a bunch of different types of competition with each other, whether it's hanging on a bar or wrestling with each other to get a ball at the end of like a 3-minute round. You'll get even wrestlers in there, soldiers, MMA fighters. Yoshiro Akiyama was there in the first season of it. That guy's strong. And in the second season, they got Dong-Hyun Kim, who's apparently a very big deal in South Korea outside of just fighting, which I never knew about. And he is regarded, in my opinion, as the second greatest Korean fighter in history, after the Korean Zombie, of course. I believe at one point he was like number 6 in the rankings. I'll always remember when he knocked out Eric Silva before USADA. Right, pre-USADA, Eric Silva was a beast, and the stun gun shot him down. That's always how his knockouts happen. Like, he would hit the guy, and they would fall straight down as if they got shot or something. Well, he was in that Physical 100 show, and he wrestled some guy, so that was pretty cool to watch. And I didn't know this about Korea. Apparently, they have a different age. South Koreans are actually 1 year older than everybody else in the world, because apparently when they're born, they're not 0 years old or a day old, right? They're 1 year old at birth, which is very, very weird. I don't know why they do that. Just a bit of a fun fact there for you. Oh, and on Twitter, someone shared with me how well I've been doing on predictions lately. And I've been, apparently, I didn't know this, I've been doing better on predictions than pretty much everybody else. So far in 2024, I've gotten 70% of all my picks correct. 10 events so far, 70%. The only thing that's above me are just the general locks throughout everybody else's picks. Now, this doesn't really mean too much. When we're talking about predictions and stuff, picks are the least important. It's usually the analysis and the breakdowns that actually matter, because anybody can get picks right. Even a blind person can get 50% of them correct. I mean, I have a brother, barely watches fights. He gets fights more correct than I do. But that's a pretty cool stat. I'll keep it on screen right here so you guys can look at it. But who knows, man? It goes back and forth with everybody. Sometimes we get a bunch of fights correct, and then there are times we get them all wrong. So watch when I'm at 70% now, but I end the year with like 50% or 40% or something. And I do have a very big parlay for UFC 300, and it stems also into the last Fight Night card. So far, I got all the picks correct on my parlay. Now I'm just waiting for 300 to get them all correct. It's a very big parlay, and if I do, I will post it up for you guys. And if I don't, I'll just pretend it never happened. It's the best way to cope with betting on fights. And Ronda Rousey's back in the news. It's been a long time since she's addressed MMA and the fans and stuff, and still as delusional as always. It seems like she hasn't learned too much over the years. You would think with her age she would get a lot wiser and accept reality, but still claiming she's the greatest fighter in the world, even though she doesn't compete. She hasn't competed in, 7 years after getting that Brazilian beat down by Amanda Nunes, and before that got KO'd unconscious by Holly Holm, but she's blaming it on her mouthpiece. Mouthpiece, really? She says she got a concussion before the fight, which I can understand, that happens sometimes, but she said it came from falling down a flight of stairs. And she said her weight cut was horrible, and to be honest, it did look pretty bad. She didn't look great on the scales. By the time she entered the cage, she was saying that she couldn't dictate the distance. She didn't know how to get in range of Holly Holm because her senses were all off due to the concussions and stuff and the bad weight cut. But it's not a one-off, right? That wasn't the only time we've seen her misjudge distance against a fighter. This has happened throughout her entire career. It's just, for the first time, her opponent was moving her feet. It makes a world of a difference when a fighter's just not standing in front of you to get hit. Like Miesha Tate walking into punches. Betch Correia, who they promoted as some huge knockout artist just to market Ronda Rousey's fight. Kat Zingano sprinted into her grave. It's no wonder you can't dictate distance when your opponent, for the first time, is actually moving away from you and using actual competent footwork here to evade your aggression. But here's the other thing. If she did in fact have a concussion, and she went to the WWE and they have a whole thing about concussions over there as well, a bunch of those wrestlers hurt each other, how did she get past the doctors at the WWE and the UFC if she was constantly concussed? Because she said when she went to the WWE, she also had to hide her concussion symptoms from the doctors. But I don't know how you do that, right? Don't they check your brain and stuff, not just ask you questions? I'm really questioning a lot of these doctors around the UFC especially, because somehow these fighters are entering the cage with one eye, one shoulder, one knee, no knees, in Kimbo Slice's case, concussed. Like, how do they gain past the doctors this easily? Unless their names are Dr. Stevie Wonder and Dr. Ray Charles, I don't know how these fighters are getting to the cage physically broken like that. Maximus Holloway is firing off the warning shot at Islam Makhachev. He said after he gets past Justin Gaethje, he's going to go after Islam for the belt. So it does look like his aspirations are at lightweight at the moment. And he said it before that he thinks Volk is going to get the fight before him against Ilia Topuria. So he has a bit of time here at lightweight to get things done there. I don't think so. I think Justin beats him. I think Islam would beat him as well. But Gaethje's also talking, and he's saying that the doctors are going to need to stop him from hurting Holloway. So Gaethje talking like this, and the fight getting closer and closer makes me more scared for Holloway that he doesn't turn into Tony Ferguson 2.0. And usually that would mean a good thing, but in this case, because he's fighting the same guy that destroyed Tony's career, I hope the same does not happen for Max, because he has an opportunity to go back down to 145 and fight Ilia Topuria, because his chances there are somewhat interesting. But I just don't see a way that he comes out of the Gaethje fight unscathed, even if he somehow wins it, because he's looking very, very big, massive, lifting all kinds of weight. He's tapping into that Samoan ancestry, man, getting big and strong, and he's been dropping his sparring partners. He usually doesn't like to hard spar that much, but he can't help himself. He is putting these guys down in training. I am also having the feeling that Max is going to surprise a lot of us when he fights Gaethje. And regarding Vicente Luque from the last Fight Night card, there were a lot of good performances on the card, especially Bazookia doing his thing. I was very happy to see him perform that well. But Vicente Luque is done. He's done. I've talked about it in one of the videos I made about him. He suffered really bad brain damage from the Jeff Neal fight, leaking from the brain because of that fight. And of course, he's never going to be the same. It doesn't surprise me the way he just folded in front of Buckley like that. The guy almost passed away. It's insane that he even came back to fight at all. And in his return, he fought RDA and wrestled his way to a win, which is so against his usual style, even though RDA has a wrestling weakness at 170. Luque doesn't like to fight that way. That was a first red flag, even though he won the fight and it was smart to do it. It was a red flag considering who he is. Now in the Buckley fight, he really doesn't get hit that hard. He shoots a horrible takedown. Buckley defends it. He pulls guard because of the poor shot and just accepts defeat. He most likely knew how hard Buckley hits. He knows the danger he would be in front of a guy like that, especially on his back. It looked like he just didn't really think of how to get out of this and just hope the ref would stop the fight, trying to protect his head at all costs. Because if you experience a brain hemorrhage, it only makes sense that his reaction to getting hit, or even someone throwing punches at him while he's on his back, is just to cover up and protect himself from that ever happening again to him. Luque's always been a fan favorite. He's always been a very fun fighter to watch. He rose up into like the top 5 at one point of his career. But seeing the way that he has performed in the RDA fight and now in the Buckley fight show that it's over for him. He should retire, in my opinion. Even though he's not that old, the damage that he has suffered throughout his career is way too much for him to continue, in my opinion. As these younger guys come up and they become more dangerous, more versatile, more well-rounded, it's only going to be worse news for him if he sticks around. And his pride, his confidence in his abilities, seeing himself decline in the rankings is only going to hurt him mentally. From a guy who was in the top 5 not too long ago to a guy that probably is going to exit the whole top 15 soon if he doesn't hang it up. And this is why fighters have to be intelligent in how they perform and how they approach their fights and not just looking to go to war. But now Buckley inside the top 15, hopefully he gets a good opponent next. Maybe like a Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, that would be interesting. But I have a feeling they might give him someone like Gilbert Burns. Get him back on that trajectory when he kicked Impa in the face. They were marketing him, promoting him. And if he could get a big win over an opponent like Gilbert Burns, they could start promoting him the same way just like before. But it is kind of funny to see him that he is number 11 in the rankings and Kevin Holland's number 15. But they fought each other in the middleweight division and Kevin Holland knocked him out with a perfect punch. It's one of those punches where it doesn't feel or look like the guy had any resistance from the blowback. He hits him like the punch went right through him. But that's the state of rankings in this sport. You could fight someone like Michael Page, who was underrated, underestimated coming into the UFC, not only by Kevin Holland, but by a lot of fans in the sport and even the odds makers. But then you see Buckley fight Vicente Luque, who's ranked higher, but he's clearly on a very steep decline. Buckley gets a win over him, and he's now ranked above both Kevin Holland and Michael Page. It's a very strategic thing for a lot of these younger guys to aim their sights on someone who is ranked, but looks like they may have declined, right? This was like Tony Ferguson, for an example, after the Justin Gaethje loss. He was in the top 5, and it would be smart for any fighter to want to fight Tony Ferguson after that. And especially after he lost to Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush, as it later became confirmed that Tony is in fact not the same anymore. And he's still highly ranked. Did you guys hear what they did to that Severino guy? The human dog that bit the other guy in the cage? They didn't just disqualify him and cut him from the UFC. They held his pay from him as well. They're going above and beyond for that kind of transgression against his opponent. You know, biting someone is one of the worst and most, inhumane and dishonorable thing you can do in a fight. Even in a street fight where, there are no rules, if anybody sees someone biting the other guy, it always, strikes everyone back. It surprised a lot of people, we got to send this guy to the outskirts, Can't have him walking around, even though it is a legitimate technique to use in a self-defense situation. But bro, they went crazy on the Severino guy. DQ, cut from the UFC, held his pay from him. What are they going to do next? Hold his family for ransom or something? I think enough is enough with Severino because he's not going to have an easy time going into another big organization in MMA. But here's the thing, they do that to Severino, but they protect and defend Chris Weidman for some reason that I don't understand. Why is Weidman getting some kind of preferential treatment here? Not necessarily from the brass, but from the commission and from other people in the media. Many people have come out, fighters and podcasters and showmen. A lot of them came out to defend Chris Weidman. And I made a video about it. I made 2 videos about this. It's shocking to me how these people are publicly coming out and defending cheating in a fight. I don't understand this, especially from these guys who've been around for a long time. The one I'm most surprised about, maybe not the most surprised about, he's always had something about him that just seems a little bit off. Ariel, for an example, he's not Team America like Daniel Cormier and Chael Sonnen and some of these other guys that are taking his back. He doesn't have this understandable bias for Chris Weidman, but he's coming out holding the banner higher than everybody else, Team Weidman all the way for some weird reason. That part I just don't understand, and I don't like when anybody is celebrating a cheater, because that was legitimately some of the worst eye-poking we've ever seen in a fight. It's disgraceful. But in good news, I've become a very big fan of Ben Whittaker. Do you guys know who Ben Whittaker is in boxing? It's one of the few boxers I am willing to watch and analyze for my own enjoyment. This guy is very, very good. He's a showman, entertaining, super flashy, super cocky. One day people are going to want to see him get knocked out. That's how it always goes for these kinds of showmen. But I would love to do an analytical piece, a video about Ben Whittaker and what he is able to do out there, because it's some special stuff. It's really cool to watch. Now, his opponents aren't necessarily the best. He hasn't gone against the high-level boxers yet. He's only just started professionally not too long ago. But it's good to see him get some steam behind him, and people are noticing his work. Oh, and I got some really cool news pretty soon. Most likely, if I get a quick response, I might be able to get out some really cool One Championship videos out for you guys. So that's really exciting. And what am I reading here? Aiden Ross? Well, he was hosting boxing events in Florida, but now he cannot do it anymore, or he's no longer allowed because one of his fighters suffered brain damage. Well, that's what happens in boxing. Fighters get brain damage. It's part of the game. So why would that not allow him to host boxing events anymore? Was he not commissioned or sanctioned? I really feel like a lot of these guys get involved in combat sports and have no idea what it's about. Like when Sneeko was sparring with Sean Strickland and got beat up bad for it. But respect to him, he took his lickings and didn't get dropped, which was quite interesting because Izzy got dropped. Sneeko's greater than Izzy somehow. That's going to be someone has to have that narrative out there, right? Someone's posting something about Sneeko being better than Izzy. And now Strickland is setting his sights on Michael Chiesa for a sparring match because they've been going back and forth on social media. Strickland always talks down on social media, but he's on it very often and talking with a lot of people. But he is at least willing to invite people to the gym, spar with him a bit, and we'll see if Michael Chiesa does it. Well, maybe we won't see it because I don't know if they'll have cameras recording it, but that is a very bad day for Michael Chiesa if he actually goes through with it. But if he has been talking a lot of trash to Sean Strickland, Manel Kape pulled out yet again. I think this is like the 3rd time or something on his own accord where he pulled out of a fight, and he was supposed to be the guy that we needed in order to get himself into a title shot because look what's happening now. It's all Kape's fault. If only he made it into his fight with Nicolau the first time, none of this stuff would have happened. right? Steve Erceg would not be in a title fight with Alexander Pantoja. The division would move along a lot better than it is right now, but the guy just can't keep himself from pulling out of fights. It's like him and Umar Nurmagomedov are having a competition as to who can pull out of fights more. And his post about this whole thing was actually kind of funny. He's like, what did he say? Let me pull it up. He says, "This is the first time I've ever pulled out of a fight. I broke the cartilage of my rib and couldn't move for a week. On Thursday last week, my surgery went extremely well. Bear in mind that all my fights that got canceled in the past was due to my opponents. Where I come from, we used to fight for free. I'm not bragging about, I'm just being honest, so don't ever think I'm like some of you guys. Allah is the great." Interesting way he's framing that, because he's saying that he pulled out only once, but he couldn't make it to the fight 3 times in his career. One time it was because he missed weight in his last scheduled fight before he tested positive for turinabol, and this one is because of an injury. In fact, I would say this is the one where it was like the least in his control. The weight cutting is in his control. He should not be having turinabol in his system. He's in control of that too. And the part where he says that all of his fights that got canceled was because of his opponents, that is not true at all. And he had some momentum behind him. You know, a lot of people were excited to see him fight when he got first scheduled against Matthias Nicolau. And now at this point, he's completely derailed himself. Usually it's an opponent that derails another fighter. Manel Kape derails himself. And it just seems like all the steam just got released and people just don't care that much about him anymore until he performs really well. And that's always going to be the main thing. Whenever a fighter is out of the scene, he always has the opportunity to get back into the cage and show everybody what they're actually made of. And Manel Kape, in my opinion, is one of the funnest fighters in the flyweight division to watch. So right now, a lot of fans are thinking this, he's not that interesting or important at the moment, but until he competes, whenever that is, I think the hype will start to build up again. If he wins, that is. If he loses, all of this is going to hit him tenfold. And because he couldn't make the fight with Nicolau this time, Alex Perez is going to be replacing him. And in other news, we finally get some kind of confirmation that Conor McGregor is going to fight, not only from himself, but Dana even posted that Conor's back. He said he's coming soon. I don't know what that means. Soon in Conor McGregor terms is like 3 years or 4 years from now. He's been saying he's going to fight soon for quite a while, and we want to see him back. We want to see him perform. I'm guessing it's probably going to be International Fight Week, and his opponent should be Michael Chandler. But interesting enough, Charles Oliveira's coach came out and said that Charles would like to fight Conor if he's available after this fight with Arman. He said that Charles would rather fight Conor than Islam Makhachev, which I would think most fighters would. But it's not the first time that Charles has called out Conor. How crazy would that be? Where Charles Oliveira is like, Justin Gaethje, you can get your title shot. Go fight Islam Makhachev. I got a date with Conor McGregor. That would be really cool to watch. And I would also guess that Conor would like to fight Charles more than fighting Michael Chandler. And that would be such a blow to Chandler because he's always supposed to be the opponent for Conor until they finally get in there. Can you imagine after all of this time, Chandler's been waiting for Conor. He's been constantly checking his social media mentions and notifications. Are they going to pull it off where they just say the fight's going to happen on social media before they offer it to me? I mean, this guy was like going to basketball games and stuff, looking for Conor, pro wrestling events and stuff like that. I mean, he's been looking for Conor McGregor all over the world just to get passed up by Charlie Olives. Would be so sad for Chandler, man. I do not want to see that happen to him. I think it should be Conor versus Chandler, Charles versus Islam if he beats Arman Tsarukyan, which is still an if. Arman is a dangerous guy and he can shock a lot of people with his performance. But that's what it should be in my opinion. And Justin Gaethje even just came out and said the winner of Arman and Charles should get the shot at Islam Makhachev. And then later in the year in Madison Square Garden, he wants to fight the winner of that fight for the lightweight title. He just doesn't want to see Dustin fight Islam in the meantime. He thinks the next fight for Islam should be the winner of Charles and Arman. So good on Justin Gaethje for even going with that. And it keeps Islam very active as he wants to be, right? That would be 3 title fights for Islam Makhachev in 2024. Exactly what we want from these champions. As a fighter, how can he turn down this sparring challenge? And with that, let's go right to the questions. We're going to start with Troy Hartung. Hey Weasel, hope you had a great Easter with your family. 2 questions. How far can you see Buckley climbing up in the welterweight division? He looks like he's got some of the best footwork that we've seen from a fighter in a while, but his wild hooks punches concern me, especially if he throws those against a great striker like Shavkat or JDM. Number 2, could you do a breakdown of Buckley versus each fighter in the top 15 of 170? I wouldn't say Buckley has some of the best footwork. He is nimble and he moves around a lot, and that has to be talked about a lot more. Just because someone has a active footwork pattern, constantly moving around and stuff, doesn't mean they have good footwork. But he does have decent footwork. I would say his positioning is better than his shot selection, and that seems to be a bigger weakness of his. Find the correct punch to throw with those positions that he takes. And if he fights JDM especially, he will definitely get countered often throughout that fight. Because when you're fighting JDM, sometimes he's so good at finding solutions at any angle that you're taking on him. He intercepts and counters you perfectly, and I see that especially as he fights Buckley. So how far do I see Buckley going up in the welterweight division? Now, it's going to depend on who he fights because different opponents with different styles are going to give him better placements to go up in the rankings. Just like how he got into the top 11 now after beating Vicente Luque, who's on a decline. But the absolute highest I could see him reaching in his career, the peak of his capabilities, I think is in the top 5. But I see him lingering into like the top 10, top 7 throughout his career. And this is how I see him going against the top 15 of the welterweight division. So I actually still see him losing to Kevin Holland in a rematch. I think he beats Vicente Luque. He loses to Michael Page, beats Neil Magny. I think he can pull off a decision win against Jeff Neal. But that's a very back and forth, tough fight to call. Wonderboy is older now. I'm not liking the older he gets going up against Buckley, who hits as hard as he does and is as fast as he is, even for a welterweight. Right now, I'll say Wonderboy, but I wouldn't be surprised if Buckley beat him. I think Brady beats Buckley. I think Gary beats Buckley. I would pick Burns against him, but I wouldn't be surprised if Buckley beat him, especially knowing that Burns is on a decline and he's much older, taking a lot of damage throughout his career. His grappling, I think, is what separates him from Buckley, but he could get caught at any point of that fight. I think JDM beats Buckley. I don't know what to say about Colby. I need to see him fight again just to know where he's at in his career. He's talking about the foot injury against Leon Edwards. It was a long time coming back. Maybe it was one bad performance, but if it wasn't, if that's how Colby is now, if he's fighting that way, I think Buckley beats him. But if we get vintage Colby Covington, I think Colby would beat Buckley. Shavkat beats Buckley. Bilal beats Buckley. Usman beats Buckley. And so does Leon. Then we go to Nano Peach. Hey Weasel, hope you are good as well as your family. Thank you so much, and yours as well. Question 1. I feel like people are underestimating the injury that Jamahal had. The Achilles injury usually ends careers or heavily diminishes them. What's your take on it? Yeah, this is true, especially if you know about the NFL and their Achilles injuries. It's usually a terminal injury in the NFL. These guys are very rare to come back the same after getting their Achilles torn. And I believe, if I'm not wrong, Jamahal Hill got his Achilles torn from like playing basketball or something. Now, I don't know which Achilles got injured. I've been trying to look it up and it just vaguely says that he ruptured his Achilles tendon. So it's going to depend if it's the right Achilles and he's in the orthodox stance trying to set off and explode for the right hand like he usually likes to do, might have a reduced explosion, therefore reduced power. Not only that, his footwork can be a little bit wonky. It could feel a bit uncomfortable, especially taking some calf kicks. And sometimes when fighters suffer some kind of injury like this, they would like to push through it, and maybe he will even overextend, really trying to explode off of the foot in a way to like prove people wrong about his injury, and that can expose him. Or if he is feeling uncomfortable in the fight, power his way through it that causes an overextension, almost like an ego move regarding his injury, and that can cause him to get countered by the potential left hook from Alex Pereira. I will talk about my official prediction for that fight in my prediction video that's going to come up probably like Monday or Tuesday or something like that. It's going to be an earlier one because I have been working on it, considering how long it's going to be. I'm covering every single fight of the prediction video as their own featured fight. So that's going to be really interesting. That's going to be fun. So yeah, I do think the Achilles injury is going to have some kind of longing effect on Jamahal Hill, at least mentally. At the very least mentally. It's very hard to come back 100% after rupturing your Achilles tendon. Then number 2, Luke Rockhold versus Joe Schilling in kickboxing. Breakdown and pick. Joe Schilling is going to knock him out. Like, Luke's a big guy. You know, he can kick pretty well. He has a good question mark kick and stuff. But Joe Schilling's been doing this, right? He hasn't been doing MMA like Rockhold has, but he has been kickboxing a lot longer. And Rockhold's hands are just not that great. He's got some precision, you know, he's got sometimes a good shot selection when it comes to his right hook, especially moving away, and his left straight. His jab is pretty decent as well. But I just think everything that Rockhold throws with his hands is something that Joe Schilling has seen a million times already and will definitely counter Rockhold, who just does not have good fundamental boxing defense. It's quite abysmal and has only gotten worse as he's gotten older, which is a very interesting thing. So honestly, I see Schilling try to make his way on the inside, boxing range with Rockhold and stick himself there, occupying the lead hand of Rockhold so he can't really use the jab as well as he wants to, and also he'll feel out the arc of the right hook. And in the meantime, he could just jab in for the 1-2, a very quick jab that gets followed by the right straight immediately. The only thing that Schilling has to watch out for are the body and head kicks from the left leg of Rockhold and the right question mark kick specifically. So definitely going with Schilling, knocking out Rockhold. And then number 3, how bad was Blanchfield striking? It reminded me of Ronda's. Yeah, she never really had great striking. I expected her only chances to win, honestly, were just on the ground. Manel was a big, strong fighter. I thought Manel was probably going to win if her weight cut was not going to hurt her, because her weight cut looked horrible. She looked like she was on death's door while on the scales. And it was very impressive to see her going into the fight and not really slow down the way that we thought she was going to. So Blanchfield had to strike with her for the most part. And there are fighters in the sport, even in the UFC, that just have horrible striking skills, as it seems like Blanchfield is more of a specialist that can brawl and tough her way through some striking exchanges if the fighter is not big, strong, and just aware enough in the stand-up to get taken to the ground. And it wasn't just that, she's also not as athletic as Manel is, or even some of the other fighters in the flyweight division, like Alexa Grasso's more athletic than she is. Valentina's, of course, way more athletic. Rose is. Even Ribas is more athletic. She is one of the least athletic fighters in the flyweight division, but she has the skills on the ground as well as being scrappy enough in the stand-up to make some kind of crazy scramble happen and lock a grip onto the opponent. And then number 4, Masvidal versus Gaethje for the Ultimate BMF. Oh, Gaethje 100% beats Masvidal. And as always, thank you for the content. Greetings from the North Pole. No problem, man, and thank you so much for the question. And then we get to Bro's Dead. Would you consider Chris Weidman's attitude towards egregiously committing fouls against his opponent out of line? I found it distasteful and out of character for a former champion to show so little regard for the rules of the sport and so little respect to his opponent. Hope they fix these gloves soon. Yeah, man, get those Trevor Whitman gloves on, man. I don't know why. Why don't they just do it? They're way better gloves, or bring back the Pride gloves. Pride gloves were iconic, and according to the fighters that fought over there and in the UFC, the gloves fit better and they feel better. I don't understand of having these kind of gloves that just naturally expand open. Now, there are some fighters, I think it was Chris Curtis that said that there's no issue with the gloves. I didn't check out the whole interview, I saw a clip of that. But then there's been way more fighters that said that there's a big problem with the gloves in that they just naturally open up, which forces your fingers to extend. Now, what Chris Weidman did, I don't think was a glove issue. He had his fingers extended directly at Bruno Silva's eyes the whole fight, and the ref kept telling him to stop that. Why listen to the ref? He's not going to take a point away. Keep cheating. Who cares, right? And just like you said, Weidman is a veteran in the sport. He's a middleweight legend at this point. You know, one of the greatest middleweights of all time, especially champions. And for him to show that little regard for his opponent and for the rules is crazy. But they do say that the older veterans usually use these cheap tactics wisely. And credit to Chris Weidman, he cheated the system and he got that victory. But it shows his kind of character in the sport that a lot of people didn't really know or even expect him to act like this. He's almost like proud of how the fight went down, and he's blaming the guy that he poked for 2.5 rounds for overreacting. And this is the guy that's representing America, trying to represent some of us, and he cheats like this, proudly too, with no remorse. He said at one point that he was sorry, but then in that same interview and the next day, he's like cracking jokes at Bruno Silva for over-exaggerating and, you know, being a wuss, you know, being soft. Like I said before, though, this is the same guy who was trying to cheat the system before when he acted like a grounded opponent from getting knee to the head by Gegard Mousasi. So looking in hindsight, it doesn't seem that surprising, you know, for him to be out of character. This probably is his character. We just don't know, for sure at least. And this goes hand in hand with that question from Anxious Sloth. Who is next for Weidman? Ikram Aliskerov? Give him Tom Aspinall and bring back Steve Mazzagatti. No, I'm just kidding. That is cruel. Or bad enough, give him Gelton Almeida. Let him get some revenge for Bruno Silva. No way, that would make people hate Gelton Almeida and give credit to Weidman for getting lay-in parade for 5 rounds. Man, Gelton Almeida is the best Brazilian heavyweight. Give him Tom Aspinall. Let's get it over and done with. No, but realistically, who would be next for Weidman? I mean, you could give him Ikram Aliskerov. Ikram would chin him so bad. Oh, I see one of the replies here. Michel Pereira. That's actually a good one. Give him Michel Pereira. And then we go to Every Knee Wilbo. Weidman versus Bo Nickel next if Bo wins next weekend. Passing of the torch for one former All-American prodigy to the next. Nah, Bo Nickel show him a little too much respect. We definitely need a foreigner in there. And if they beat Weidman, we give him American citizenship. How about that? Something more important than fighting for the belt. We're going to fight for citizenship. Can you imagine if they start doing that? Not in this country, but like in another country. That'd be wild. In fact, Ilia Topuria got his citizenship in Spain after he beat Volkanovski. That's pretty wild. No, but if they do Bo Nickel and Chris Weidman, sure, why not? Weidman's on the way out. He's much older. I mean, he looked pretty impressive before, not even before, just around the eye pokes. But Bo Nickel is so young, I actually don't know if he beats Weidman right now. He's way too green. And then we go to Vivid MMA. Who really won? Number 1, John Jones versus Alexander Gustafsson won. I would have to watch it again, but I thought that Gustafsson won. Number 2, Cejudo versus DJ the second time. I thought the Cejudo won. Number 3, Adesanya versus Romero. I thought Adesanya won. Benson Henderson versus Frankie Edgar 2. I picked Henderson. Costa versus Romero. I thought Costa won. Benavidez versus Cejudo. I thought Benavidez won. Overeem versus Verdum 3. I thought Overeem won. Woodley versus Wonderboy the second time. I thought Wonderboy won. Romero versus Jacare. I thought Romero won. And Edgar versus Penn won. I thought Edgar won. But if you guys want some videos for these, I can do that. These are just who I thought won live, without looking over it again. Then we go to ARR. Lightweight remains the only division where the old guard maintain their ranks and beat the younger fighters coming up. Yeah, man, that's so crazy. I was for sure thinking that the younger guys would come up and beat the older fighters. Such an impressive performance from those guys, like Dustin beating BSD, Gaethje beating Fiziev, Dariush beating Gamrot. It just really goes to show you that lightweights are the best fighters. Because in every other division, this does not happen. Maybe a couple of them, maybe in another division, 1 or 2 older guys can keep their spots there as they are older. But in lightweight, it seems like a consistent thing where now even Charles Oliveira has an opportunity to do the same. But he's going up against the best of the younger guys. So besides Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira is the best of the older guys of lightweight, if you want to say it that way. And he's going up against the best of the younger ones. Very fitting. And then you say it's oddly resilient to the normal thing of new gen fighters beating older ones. Exactly. Why do you think that is? Higher skill level. There are circumstances with the styles and, depending on the guys that they fought. I mean, that's always going to be a thing. For example, like Arman Tsarukyan will probably have a better chance of competing with Dustin Poirier than Benoit Saint Denis will, stylistically. And Rafael Fiziev, for an example, would be a harder matchup for Charles Oliveira than I think Arman Tsarukyan is. And if Arman could take down Justin Gaethje, he would be a harder stylistic matchup than Rafael Fiziev. Rafael Fiziev molded well with Gaethje's style. That allowed him to attack in different kind of ways compared to how he would have to attack Arman Tsarukyan, given how heavy he is in wrestling. So there is that as well, but it's easy to just look at it. If you want to look at it in a very general way, the skill level at lightweight seems to be higher than the other weight classes. So they're able to get away with these kind of wins against the younger up and coming guys, even though they're not necessarily young. Some of them, they're even in their early 30s, late 20s. It's still quite different from the other weight classes. So appreciate Dustin, Justin, Charles, Islam. These guys are not going to be sticking around that much longer. But I don't know, do you consider Islam Makhachev part of them with Dustin, Justin, and Charles? I just thought of that. He's not young, so you can't consider him one of the younger guys. He has much more experience than some of them, but he hasn't been fighting as long or on top of the weight class as long as Charles, Justin, and Dustin have. So, I don't know where to really categorize Islam Makhachev. I guess you could put him with the older guys as well. It's a special bunch, man. I don't know if we're going to see this in the lightweight division after these guys retire. But here's the thing. Eventually, they are going to get so old where they can't keep up with the younger guys. But given their ages, it seems like the younger fighters came up and fought them, competed up against them before the older guys left their prime. That might be a big reason as to why they succeeded against the up-and-coming contenders. Then we go to MMA protagonists. Who would win in these fights all in their prime? BSD versus Eddie Alvarez. I would pick Eddie Alvarez. BSD might be big, but Eddie's going to be quite hard to take down, I think, for BSD. And even boxing-wise, Eddie might be a better boxer than BSD. They both hit very hard. They're both extremely tough. But you got Eddie in his prime, so this is fresh chin Eddie Alvarez, or at least somewhat fresh chin, as fresh as it could be while he's in his prime. And I think BSD would eventually get knocked out. Nick Diaz versus Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal can win this fight, but man, he's got some low fight IQ sometimes. I mean, look at the way he fought Ian Gary. What was that? Sometimes he's passive when he should not be. He's way better being an offensive boxer than a passive boxer looking for clinches. If he fights passive against Nick Diaz, he's going to get knocked out. His body's going to wither away from all the shots to the liver, and he will get chinned and put down. But if he's offensive and plays it smart, right, prime Jeff Neal with the best game plan that we've seen him perform with, I think he should be Nick Diaz then. Cain Velasquez versus Tom Aspinall. I'm going to go with Tom Aspinall. He can match Cain's speed. One shot to that chin and Cain is going down. I think Tom will stuff the takedowns, but I don't see Tom Aspinall taking down Cain. I mean, Cain was the same guy that stuffed Brock Lesnar's takedowns, so it's going to be quite difficult for Tom Aspinall unless he gets a perfect shot, But I think Aspinall will chin Cain Velasquez quite early in the fight. Cain's boxing defense wasn't really that good. Aspinall's very quick on his feet, and I think he would blitz down Cain from a little bit of a further range, catching him with that initial combination. Stipe versus Ciryl Gane. I'm going to go with Stipe, takes him down, and just ground and pounds him. And then finally, Luke Rockhold versus Dricus du Plessis. I think DDP chins Luke Rockhold, but it's actually a tougher fight than you would probably imagine because Rockhold's going to be hard to take down, and I don't think Dricus would get it down there. In fact, Dricus might even attempt it and place himself in a worse position where Rockhold's now on top. We've seen him do this before. We've seen Dricus attempt a takedown, misjudge the shot, collapsing on his back with his opponent on top of him. If that happens with Luke Rockhold, it is over. It is over. Rockhold's one of the scariest fighters in middleweight history to have on top of you. So there is a real chance there that Rockhold could beat Dricus because of Dricus' mistakes. But Luke does make a lot of mistakes in the stand-up, and I think Dricus could chin him just getting in there. Pretty much just getting in there and not getting caught clean by a check right hook or a left straight. It's a tougher fight the more you think about it. And then with two, Big Schlong Dave. Does it curve? If so, which way? What? Let me check. Let me play an Oliveira highlight reel. Get some lotion ready. Okay, so it curves directly up, like 90 degrees up. It's quite some work to use the bathroom. I'm sorry, I don't know, man. Thank you for the question. Then we go to Nico Repetto. If you had to coach a featherweight to fight a heavyweight, what could the game plan be? It's going to be similar to anybody fighting a larger person, and that's just to focus on gassing them out. So don't engage, really, unless there's like a clear opening for a shot to the jaw, because at any weight, you could knock somebody out. It just becomes easier the bigger you are. So a lot of feinting, overload the nervous system. It's going to cause them to gas out a little bit easier, get them to chase you a bit. A lot of times the fighter's instinct is to engage after they get hit by something. So even a leg kick, which is like a further, longer attack, they're going to try to grab a hold of you or at least aggro onto you and chase you down sometimes. That's very good for you to run around, move away, evade everything, at least try to. And by the time you see them start to slow down and breathe heavy, that's when you start to put more pressure. Focus on your boxing and only focus on the fundamentals. Do not throw uppercuts. Focus on the jab, right straight, right overhand, left hook, maybe a right hook. Do not kick. Don't try to take him to the ground. Don't clinch up with him, and keep range at all times, at least enough where you can land your punches at the very end of them. But all in all, it's going to be a very difficult task for a featherweight to beat a heavyweight because in this scenario, I'm guessing the heavyweight knows how to fight. Then we'll go to Kaylan Saraki. Hypothetically, if Wonderboy and Ciryl Gane were the same size, who do you think would win in a pure striking match? Wonderboy. Easily Wonderboy. Gane is good for a heavyweight, but he gets away with his athleticism a lot of times. Whereas Wonderboy, he has that too, so he is athletic enough to keep up with some of Ciryl Gane's explosions and his speed, but he has the clear advantage in technique and skill overall. And he's also much more experienced in a pure striking match than Ciryl Gane is, so I would definitely go with Wonderboy. Then we go to the next question. Why do you think Charles accepted the Arman fight and not wait for the Islam rematch? And why do you think UFC booked that fight and the Max and Gaethje fight, considering all four most likely won't fight Islam in June? It seems like Islam will have to defend his belt in August or September. That will give sufficient time to all four fighters to potentially fight Islam. Thoughts? Number one, stack the UFC 300 card with as much big talent as they can get. Number two, I think they did suspect that Islam would fight only in Abu Dhabi. Therefore, booking the fight here in April, it will line up with the potential winner of Charles Oliveira and Arman Tsarukyan to fight Islam later in the year. But now that Islam is very adamant in fighting in June, they might have to give him Dustin Poirier in the meantime. And here's the other thing. Dana already said that the winner of Charles and Arman is the one that fights Islam next. Now, things can change considering what happens in the Gaethje and Max Holloway fight. If that turns out to be a much bigger, more exciting win for one of those two guys, and the fans would like to see the winner of that fight Islam rather than Arman or Charles, they might go that direction. But I do think the winner of Arman and Charles is going to fight Islam over Gaethje and Max. But they do run into another problem as well, and that is Topuria. right? Because Max Holloway should be the guy that fights Topuria next. The potential damage from the Gaethje fight could run him out of that option, and maybe even Topuria would have to fight somebody else, maybe like a Ortega or Movsar Evloev. So even though these fights are insane, it looks like the booking of Charles and Max on UFC 300, they create a little bit of a mess in the order of their weight classes a little bit, but not enough for people to really care as much about that, you know? So I think Islam is going to fight in June, probably against Dustin Poirier. Then he's going to fight the winner of Charles and Arman, maybe the winner of Gaethje and Max, later in the year in Abu Dhabi. Then we go to Swish. How would Alex Pereira do against John Jones in the light heavyweight era? Also with Anthony Johnson, Daniel Cormier, Alexander Gustafsson, etc. He loses easily to John Jones. I think he knocks out Rumble. He gets destroyed and dominated by Daniel Cormier. And also with Gustafsson. Those guys will all take him to the ground and hold him down. That was the strongest the light heavyweight division has ever been. And Pereira is just too much of a specialist to handle the good wrestlers of that day. He probably beats all the guys who mainly strike, like Rumble for an example, like Jimmy Manuwa. But they had some really effective wrestlers like Jones, DC, and Gus, right? People forget that Gus wrestled very well with DC and Jones. And he also trains with Hamzat, so, you know, he's getting a lot of skills, even from the smaller, well-technical wrestlers. Then with the Gabenator. Could Amanda Nunes beat any male fighter that has ever been in the UFC roster? Maybe someone like CM Punk. Yeah, she would beat CM Punk. But no gimpy fighters? Wait, that might be the wrong word, because gimp means a lot of different things. All right, besides like the outliers that don't belong in the UFC, no, I don't think Amanda Nunes beats any of them, even the flyweights. The strength difference is way too much. Then with the Angel Alcala, can you do 500 push-ups in 1 hour? Probably, maybe. Fun fact, in high school, I held the record for most push-ups in a minute. 78 push-ups in 1 minute was the record until the next week, where my friend broke that with 84. So I think I could do 500 an hour. Then we're going to Firecracker. You always say that the new generation fighters will beat the older generation fighters. But when we saw fighters like Vitor Belfort go on TRT, he has so much success. So do you agree that it's more of an age thing than a skill gap? Yeah, because with age comes skill gap usually throughout all sports, not just combat sports. Now, there are going to be outliers. There's going to be guys like Jose Aldo. There's going to be guys like GSP, like Dominic Cruz, like Uriah Faber coming back and beating Ricky Simone. You know, there's a lot of examples that's happened throughout combat sports that prove that even an older guy is not only capable of beating the younger guys at a steep decline of his skills, but even their skills at their prime is still above even some of the newer guys. Like, for an example, if you look at Conor McGregor at the prime of his featherweight career, stylistically, he could beat almost every single featherweight champion that's ever been in the UFC. We're talking about Jose Aldo. We're talking about, Max Holloway, Alexander Volkanovski, and Ilia Topuria. Not that he outright beats them, but when you think about the matchups, it really puts into question how good was Conor McGregor. And he was a long time ago in the featherweight division. This is like back in 2015. We've had 3 champions since Conor McGregor got that belt. And he arguably could beat all of them. Arguably. I think Volkanovski would be the most difficult fight, and Ilia Topuria would be very hard for him as well. But he could pull those off, absolutely. Or you look at Jose Aldo, in his prime, he's better than most of the fighters that's ever competed in the UFC, skill for skill. GSP is still ahead, technically, than most of the welterweight division. And you give an example for Vitor Belfort, when he's on TRT, incredibly dangerous. TRT Vitor could beat most of the middleweights. Not all of them. There are some guys that could definitely beat him. But if you put TRT Vitor into today's middleweight division, he would wreak havoc upon that division. So if I said before, that the younger guys are always going to beat the older guys, I don't know if I said always, but I don't think always. But generally, this is going to be true, that the younger guys are going to beat the older guys, and the newer generation is usually going to be better than the older generation, without looking at outliers and special talent. It comes with age. The younger guys learn from the older. They get better because of this. They understand more game plans and different kind of techniques that they can implement that maybe the older guys were not able to do so. So that's generally what it is. Then we'll go to Tyrone Winter. After rewatching all of Usman's and Colby's fights, I've come to the conclusion that Usman could have easily won, if not dominated Colby, if he had mainly just wrestled. With Colby seemingly not having great takedown defense, shown against Leon Edwards, who took him down with ease and let him back up, RDA, who was tired, and Dong Hyun Kim, who back in the day, I think that Usman being physically stronger, even shown when defending Colby's takedowns, would have easily out-wrestled and beat Colby 50-45. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, I do think that if Usman went the more wrestling route, it would have been an easier fight for him. The physical strength between the two seems to be apparent. Usman was definitely much stronger than Colby was. So yeah, I do kind of agree with this. Now, I don't think it would have been easy fight. I don't think he would have easily won. I think Colby could find some opportunities to scramble and chain wrestle with Usman, but I agree that Usman would have ultimately won the fight and maybe fought him similar to the way that he fought Tyron Woodley. That kind of game plan I think could have worked pretty well against Colby Covington, using his strength against Colby, keeping him up against the fence, taking him down from there, land good body shots whenever he tries to stand up, and just look to control him when he's on the ground, because anytime he's looking for ground and pound, Colby's going to look to scramble and try to get out of there. Keeping it in a striking match, strangely enough, made it more difficult for Usman. Then we're going to Zig Boy. Do you think Colby Covington is completely washed, or do you think it was just ring rust? What do you presume his future will be like? Love the channel, keep it up. Thank you so much, man. I don't know. I can see the ring rust thing because he didn't fight for a while. He looked extremely awkward and strange in front of Leon. Now, he did mention that he broke his foot and stuff, so that may be a thing as well. We're going to know for sure in his next fight if he's washed, if it was ring rust, if it was the injury that made him fight this way, and where he stands in the UFC. And then we go to Oliveira. Hey Weasel, love the content. Thank you so much, man. Lately, I've watched all of Ilia Topuria's UFC fights and noticed his dominance and overall just aura of invincibility. Besides the Jai Herbert head kick, his defense just seems unbreakable, especially his head movement. If you were a fighter, then how would you approach a fight against Ilia? And what different ways of techniques would you use to beat a fighter with such solid defense and fighting style like Ilia Topuria? So if a fighter were to go up against Ilia Topuria, there are some defensive holes that he has. Now, he's not completely unbreakable. He will oftentimes drop his right hand when he's throwing a left hook, especially in the pocket. So there are even defensive mistakes in the best area of where he performs, in the pocket, dropping that right hand. And in that range, he likes to throw hooks more than anything else, right? Hooks and overhands. So if you keep everything tight from your guard to your punches, you could get the Ilia's chin. In fact, Jai Herbert did hit him with a hook to the head before he got slept. So there is even a possibility that Ilia eats your shot and still slumps you over. But as he's throwing that left hook, especially to the body where he sets up the overhand right, keeping your right elbow in the orthodox stance tucked and tight to the body, hand up to guard the head, you could rotate to counter him with that left hook to the chin, because usually it's going to be open for you. Now, from range, it's a different story. So Ilia Topuria likes to lean on the front foot a lot. He likes to stalk, look for the opening, and constantly swaying his head for openings, which can also draw out counter or intercepting shots from you that he can read. So a fighter would have to be very aware of that when he fights Ilia Topuria, not to just waste offensive strikes as he starts to read and download as he engages you past that long distance into the pocket later in the fight. But one thing a fighter could do are same side combinations, especially off the lead hand from orthodox. So if someone throws a jab into a left high kick, it could force his right hand down to parry as he's leaning in, so the distance should be there for the shin to connect, and could catch him as his right parry hand is down. He doesn't generally have the best kind of defense to guard or evade a head kick, especially if you're able to set it up this way. Right? If you occupy his hands, you should be able to find some kind of path for your head kicks to get through. So off the top of my head, that's kind of a couple ways that a fighter could get to Ilia Topuria. But great question, man. Then we go to Naman Jamil. Can you do a video on who the lightweight GOAT is, similar to the video you made on GSP and Kamaru? I feel like it's an interesting convo between Khabib, Charles, and some others. Yeah, I could do it if you guys want. Those are actually pretty fun. It is extremely subjective, very opinionated, but I think it brings up a really cool and interesting conversation. I would love to do it again with other weight classes. I could do it for every weight class if you guys want. Then we go to Omnipotent Spud, Hunter x Hunter, or Yu Yu Hakusho. I would definitely go with Hunter x Hunter. JJK or Demon Slayer. I like JJK definitely a lot more. Demon Slayer's got good action and animations and stuff, but I like the story of JJK and the characters a lot more. Then we go to Cards G. Just finished Berserk 1997, the old one, and I'm absolutely hooked. What do you recommend I watch next in terms of anime, since I'm now getting into it more? I heard the other reboots are so bad. Any other animes you recommend? Yeah. So Berserk is goated. Absolutely goated. I would say watch the 3 movies. You will not regret it. It is better than anything else you can watch for Berserk. But of course, the manga or the comics are, I think, the best way to consume Berserk if you like it that way. But if you're a visual guy, if you like to just watch it on screen, watch the movies. It won't cover the whole story, though. It covers, probably, in my opinion, the best part of it. But I actually showed one of my friends the movies. We watched them, and he was absolutely hooked. He watched the new adaptation of the series, and it was horrible. Yeah, so the new series that they made not too long ago, it is trash. But any other anime I would recommend, Attack on Titan is always the best, I would say, for anybody getting into it. Dragon Ball Z as well, but they're very different. Yeah, Attack on Titan is probably the best one to get into. Baki is really cool as well. It's more of a martial arts kind of anime. Hajime no Ippo is another good boxing anime you can get into. Most people think that Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood is the best anime of all time. It's a really good one. My personal favorite is Bleach. mainly because of the new arc that just came out. So yeah, some really good stuff for you there. Then with the Yeet Squad. Hey Weasel, my question is, who are your favorite fighters on Tekken and why? I play with Horong, that's my main. I got to, in Tekken 8, I got to rank Garyu, I think. It's like top 18% of the players or something like that with him. I also play with Kazuya. I play with Dragunov. I play with Steve Fox. But Horong is definitely my main. I think Kazuya is the coolest one, though. He's the best character in the game. Let's see, what other question? We'll do one more. I'm going just like through the whole thing. And whenever question looks pretty cool. Okay, we'll go with Tanner McGuire. What makes Oliveira so lethal? He's truly an anomaly amongst the world's best finishers. He's very well-rounded when it comes to his offensive skill set. He's got decent takedowns, especially from the clinch. He's got, of course, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills and, probably the best submissions in the sport's history. And he has a good understanding of the fundamental boxing skills offensively while bringing forward really good kicks, front kicks to the body, round kicks to the head you saw against Dariush, good leg kicks as well. He's competent in the clinch, landing good knees and elbows, controlling the opponent's posture, insane pressure. He's such an offensive-minded fighter. It's almost like if you look at him as like a video game character, this guy put all of his stat points into his offense. He's got power. He's pretty fast for a lightweight and is technically so offensively well-rounded with real killer instinct that cannot be taught. A true do-or-die kind of fighter. And he made his way to the absolute top, one of the greatest lightweights of all time, with such a risky style. That is impressive, man. And that is ultimately the end of the episode, guys. I would go for more. I don't know if you guys like that, where I'm just like going through the list of the questions, because sometimes you guys have good questions or fun questions. They're probably submitted later, and that's probably why they're not getting as much likes. So maybe toward the end of the episodes, I'll just start skimming through to give everybody a chance. We're a democracy over here, right? I don't know if that's the right description of it, but I don't know anything about politics. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and if you did, make sure to give this a video a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. For those who wanted to know about the history podcast, that's always in the description below. I'll probably leave a pinned comment about it as well. We're covering the Champions of Christ on there. We just got done with Vlad the Impaler. Next, we're doing Stephen the Great. Then we're going to do John Hunyadi, then Jesh Castrioti. Really cool stuff, very interesting, and we're having a lot of fun over there. So I'll see you guys in the next video.